Hey, everybody. Lee and Thomas, thank you guys. I'm so sorry I got ahead of myself earlier. Just a reminder, guys, please go and check out the NFT gallery, the In Real Life NFT gallery. Do your proof of attendance protocol for this event, and make sure on the app you're taking pictures, you're hashtagging Dig South, and let's spread the news about this event. And so now, our next speaker is Alex Gonzalez is going to have a really great, amazing conversation with Melissa McGee Proctor, who is the CMO of the Atlanta Hawks. And, woohoo! And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Alex, and then please go to the app and read the rest of his bio. Alex Gonzalez is a recognized expert in innovation, strategic marketing, change leadership, strategy, and corporate transformation. He brings over 25 years of business and leadership experience spanning Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies, entrepreneurial and civic organizations. Alex is the author of the book, Disruptor: How to Challenge the Status Quo to Unlock Innovation, and that will be published in 2022. So let's welcome Alex and Melissa to the stage.
All right. Can you hear me? Am I on? Are we on? Okay, because everybody up here, we need your attention. If you're up on the sides, it's time. Melissa is in the house. The Hawks are in the house here in Charleston. I don't even want to ask Melissa who if this is technically that other team's region here in Charleston, because this is Hawks country, right? So, all right, well, hello everybody. I host a series called Disruptor Studios, where I get to talk to very disruptive leaders that challenge the status quo and really redefine how we do things. And Melissa is absolutely one of them. I've had her on my podcast, which you could go to check out on disruptorstudio.show, and she's going to be in my upcoming book. And she has a book herself called
From Ball Girl to CMO.
From Ball Girl to CMO, and we're going to talk a bit about that. And so, Melissa, you have quite a journey. You've been through Turner Media, and we're going to kind of get a little to your history, and of course with the Hawks. But let's kind of start with today. because you are a CMO at a sports brand, a major sports brand. What does that mean? What is that all about?
That's such a great question because it can mean so many things. I have around 9 direct reports, 10 different departments that roll up into my CMO position. And we have multiple brands. So the Atlanta Hawks is our core brand, but I'm also the chief marketing officer of State Farm Arena, where we play, in addition to our 2K team, Hawks Talent Gaming Club, and our G League team, the College Park Skyhawks. So it's much broader than just the Atlanta Hawks, but it's everything from advertising, promotion, all of our social, mobile app, web work. We have an internal agency called Hawk Studios. So all of our motion graphics, video content, both in arena and out market. Our brand merchandising, our entire retail operation, we do internally.
Right.
So that's everything from e-com, our in arena stores, how we manage our retail truck. Also our game presentation team. So that's live entertainment and production. So that's out in market when we're activating at parades and all that good stuff, in addition to everything that happens in our building, from our center hung, the engineering on the back end, all of our fascia, the boards going around, and ensuring that all of that is aligned. And most recently, we created a new division called Entertainment Industry Relations.
Wow.
And being in Atlanta, there's so much happening on the entertainment scene with film production, music, and how do we really align all of that talent and harness it internally within our brands and also with our corporate partners to get alignment. And then the final one is brand communications that I co-manage with our head of PR. So that's everything in PR outside of the basketball team and that help manage that too.
So it's not just about hanging out with Trae Young on, after games and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Because there is this element with marketing, of course, always has a reputation. Hey, it's about advertising and brand and media. But in sports, people think it's about checking out the games and social. I mean, what you just described, there's like some deep, gritty work you got to do.
I mean, I look at it as the levers to brand relevance. How are we really engaging our audiences and driving revenue? So it's supporting our ticket sales team. It's supporting our corporate partnerships team, helping with ideation for brand integration. But, so much of it sometimes is just looking at storylines, what's happening within the basketball world. And with that, and then what's happening in Atlanta and how we continue to stay relevant in our city, but also for our team.
And it's interesting because, you think about, we were just talking about the conference business is changing with COVID and all that, but it seems like sports brands more are really becoming content providers and kind of content brand. Is that how you think about that with the Hawks?
I was just reading this great article this weekend on Netflix, and they were talking about how Netflix, obviously stock is going down and all of that.
Yeah.
And they said that live sports is the one thing that Netflix needs to keep them alive, and the power of what live sports is. And that's content. Some of our greatest revenue comes from our broadcast distribution deals of what we're able to do based on our basketball games being seen. And so for us, we have to think long-term. All right, cable has evolved. I worked in cable for many years, and so I've seen that evolution. Looking at streaming is also evolving in real time. But if it ever comes to a point where individual teams are going to be responsible for what their content is on other platforms, long form content isn't what we do. Our games are long form content.
Right.
But looking at how we monetize our games, it is creating content with integrated partners. And that's one thing that we can absolutely control outside of broadcast rights. And so obviously, for people who love sports, there have been so many new apps and things that have been created on monetizing even micro minutes, like there's buzzer that now exists where you can just look at the last 2 minutes or 60 seconds of a game and just pay for that instead of paying for the entire cable package to watch the whole game.
Now, are you seeing that, with the evolution of how Gen Z, which, I'm much older than Melissa, so I do have Gen Zers at home, which are my focus group. I always say my marketing focus group, and how things will evolve. But are you seeing that in terms of even how in sports, how Gen Zs are consuming versus us older folks on that, and how you can adapt? Is this part of the adaptation of these micro minutes? Is this part of it?
I mean, I definitely think that reduced attention spans play a part in that, but I think there's a space for everything. So mind you, I also work for the arena. And so I think during COVID, we saw what the power of live events really means. People are always like, oh, we can do everything digitally. I have my Oculus, I'll watch this whole concert on my couch. And that sounds great in theory and is good depending on what your circumstances are. But once the world opened back up, people came back with a vengeance. And so you really can't replace the power of physical connection and seeing people together. And so I think that will always have a role. But I do think for the next generation, there's a lot of other opportunities that we need to figure out how we create both the digital and physical world and put them together in some ways. So AR, VR, all the rest. But I don't think it's ever going to be one or the other, but we're trying to do our best. And I think sports as a whole is really trying to figure out how we can get more in the digital space.
Right. Now speaking of that, because that is a big part of your role, it's you're talking about State Farm Arena. It's, that's an asset, something you're responsible for marketing, for events and so forth. And you were part of the remodel, or to me, it's like a whole new building. It's not even
Called it an arena transformation.
It is an arena transformation. And I will tell you, having been at what used to be called Phillips Arena to State Farm Arena, it is night and day, totally different. But there was some intentionality there as well in terms of how you even branded the space. And so talk a little bit about kind of the Hawks brand and how you think about it, because I think there's a lot of focus on the community.
Yeah, so I got to the Hawks around 8 years ago. And at that time, we really had to create what our brand mantra is. What did we want to do moving forward? Because we did a ton of consumer research. And the biggest thing we saw was apathy. There were people who were upset from us training Dominique Wilkins. And that happened many, many years before that. And so when we did this research, we saw there wasn't a connection to the community. And the one thing that we could do as an organization is say, how can we be true to Atlanta? Right. And Atlanta was rapidly evolving, is still evolving. There's all different ways, but there's some things that are just core to it as a city. It's authenticity, the city too busy to hate, civil rights, so many things. Right. And so when we took that brand mantra and defined it, we put together a brand book for the Hawks brand that really spoke to our colors, why we did certain things that we did. And what was great about that arena transformation project is it was, how do you then create this physical embodiment of this true to Atlanta brand? Right. And so for that, we went into the city. We worked with local artists. We looked at local restaurants. So Old Lady Gang that Kenny Burris has, we brought that into the building. JR Crickets, which is known in a lot of ways, some lemon pepper wings.
There we go. We got a fan in Atlanta.
That's coming in the building. Killer Mike, who is well known as an activist and rapper and all other things. He had a local barbershop that he was really using to help Black economic empowerment in Atlanta. We said, how do we partner with him and create a barbershop experience where you can get your haircut in the building and watch the game and use it as a flagship store for him? And so we were able to do that. So putting it all together and looking at the art, we have a Peace Up, A-Town Down, huge billboard, a banner in the building that people love and take selfies with. And so the combination of all, physically, in addition to our game presentation, which my team is amazing. We're like the #1 in the NBA for game presentation. We want to make sure that if you come to a Hawks game in State Farm Arena, it would be an experience you could only get in Atlanta. Because if we can execute that, then we are officially true to Atlanta and true to our brand.
And so we both work in kind of marketing Atlanta, and it's interesting to see how sports brands are becoming more than just about the sport. It is about community, and it is a vital part of the identity, at least for what we're seeing in Atlanta, and we're seeing it with some of your colleagues on the other teams as well too. But the Hawks really were very intentional on those names you mentioned, and in terms of really promoting it, but just beyond promoting it, it's integrating it into, this is who we are.
Yeah, I mean, even the Zach Brown band, who's from Georgia, looking at Zach Brown, creating a space. He was well known for his food trucks at his concerts. We said, let's create a food hall area of the arena dedicated to Zach Brown. And then we did that. But then we had an amazing art curator that went into the community and literally had kids at our courts creating art that we then put up in the building. And so all of it is the storytelling aspects of it. But in doing it, no one could pick up that building and put it in another city because it wouldn't make sense. Right. That was our goal.
So speaking of storytelling, let's actually go back a little bit because, of course, your book's called From Ball Girl to CMO. And so you were, and it's, we're talking that when the book comes out, a lot of people thought you played basketball. You did not, although you wanted to be a coach.
I did.
So when were you a ball girl for the Miami Heat, and why and how did that all come about?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Miami, born and raised, and I was always an artist. So drawing and painting from middle school, went to magnet art for high school. And when I was 15, I remember talking to my mom, telling her I wanted to get a job. And she was like, she's from Belize. My mother's from Belize. My father's from Jamaica. So she knew nothing of sports in America. Like, no baseball, no football, basketball, nothing. And at the time, I had a cousin that really loved watching the Miami Heat. So I would watch games with her, and she kind of taught me about the sport. And I was like, oh, but I liked basketball, like how people like soap operas. Like it was like, oh, all right, this is entertainment. This is cool. Never having played. And so I told my mom I want this job, and she said, okay, Mel, you can get a job as long as it's in whatever you want to do for the rest of your life. How many people knew at 15 what y'all were going to do for the rest of your life?
I don't know at 50, so.
And so at the time, I really loved basketball, but when I watched the games, I never saw women on TV because this was before there were women referees, women were allowed in the locker room. And so I told my mom I wanted to become the first female coach in the NBA. And she said, okay, go get a job in the NBA. And that was it. Like, she laid down the gauntlet. I had no choice. And this was pre-email. So I'm writing letters to the Miami Heat and calling 1-800 numbers and eventually getting in touch with people. And I would draw all over the envelopes.
Right.
And I didn't know what marketing was or branding, but I branded myself so well in that instance. The equipment manager is who they get me in touch with. And he was like, I love your letters. You know, your artwork's really great. I have no jobs. I have ball boys. You're a girl. I don't know what you would do.
Right.
And I was like, I'm willing to try, you know, give me a shot. I have no choice. Like, give me this job. And so I kept calling him. And one day he said, if you call me one more time, I'm not going to hire you. So I stopped for a while, then I kept calling.
Good.
And then he was like, you know what, kid, you got a lot of heart, you know, but I want to explain this to you. This is grunge work. And he tried his best to deter me. He was like, it's mopping up sweat. It's folding towels. It's coming in early. It's staying late. You have to have good grades because it was important to him that all the ball kids had good grades. He was like, oh, and by the way, it doesn't pay. I was like, wow, like child labor laws was clearly
exactly.
But you know, it was a volunteer job, but you would work for tips. So the visiting team's equipment manager would tip out the equipment manager from our team, and then we would all get whatever money was left. So that was what it was. And so I said, I didn't care. I still wanted to do it. So he finally invited me in for a preseason game one day. It was at the then Miami Arena. I want to say it was like the Heat versus the Magic. I had never been to a professional sporting event in my life. Like it was like watching television that came to life right in front of me. And I had no clue what I was doing. Didn't know how to rebound, didn't know anything. But I hustled and I was diving for loose balls and doing whatever I thought I needed to do. And, you know, he gave me a little outfit. So I thought I was styling. And then he was like, you know what, you did a great job, come back. And that was the beginning of my career in sports.
Yeah, there we go. And then what did that lead to in terms of you know being a ball girl? I mean, because I know you talked about you learned a lot there, but you did not become an NBA coach. What was that conversation? Someone had a conversation with you that there's some realities you got to face in that.
You know, it was so crazy. It's when I was a ball girl, like Pat Riley was a head coach of the Heat. And so he would write up these plays on this like blue notebook and he would like write them and then crumble them up and throw them underneath the bench after he'd call a timeout. Right. So at the end of the game, I would pick up all these crumpled pieces of paper and like put it in a binder. I knew that I was going to use them in some way for my coaching career. And that never happened. But while I was still in high school, I was doing art. So I was doing gallery exhibitions and a lot of the players started buying my art, which was a direction I didn't see at the time. Like listening to that NFT panel earlier, I was like, oh my gosh, like I vibe with that. I love that. And so a woman that I met through the Miami Heat went to Wake Forest University and I knew nothing of Wake because in Miami, Wake isn't a thing, but I knew about the basketball team. And so I applied for Wake and I actually got accepted on an art scholarship. And so I spent 4 years at Wake, but every summer I would go back to Miami to volunteer because I still wanted to work in basketball. So it was learning more about the draft and free agency, putting together scouting reports. I think at the time they launched their WNBA team, the Miami Soul, they had for a short time. So I got to work on that as well. And then my senior year, I was like, this is it, I'm getting my job in the NBA. So that was like the goal.
And so, which I love this part. So here you are, you spent years as a ball girl in the NBA. You met the owners of the Miami Heat.
Oh yeah.
You went to Wake Forest University, pretty good school. And what did the NBA tell you when you applied?
So I got letters of recommendation from Alonzo Mourning and Pat Riley. Like I knew this internship was mine. Like couldn't nobody out NBA me at this point. And I did my first interview. They loved me. And then they called me back and said, Melissa, we think you're great. You're highly recommended. However, you are too creative for us. We are a business and you don't fit the mold of what we're looking for in the NBA. And so we are not going to allow you to get this internship. And I was crushed because that was what I was supposed to be doing. Later on, I learned that NBA stood for nothing but attorneys in a lot of people's minds, which was not a bad thing, but their business is based on licensing and, sports, rights.
There's a lot of attorneys in sports.
David Stern was an attorney. Adam Silver was an attorney. And so, so much of that is really how their focus of their business was. And at the time as a creative, based on that particular opportunity, I was not a fit. And so that was like, well, I guess I'm not going to get a job in the NBA.
So that's, you know, a big life rejection. And then you go back to your now alma mater or soon to be alma mater, Wake Forest, and go, I'm going to get my master's. And what did they say? That's
what everyone does. If you don't know what you're going to do after college, you just stay in school. Right? That's the answer. And so I was a darling of the comms department. I knew I was like, I'll just get my master's. I'll teach because I love to teach. And I had my interview with the dean for the master's program. And he was like, Melissa, everyone loves you here. Like, you're great. You've done so much. I was a TA, all type of stuff. And he was like, we feel like you're using this as a crutch and we're not going to give you something to fall back on. So we are not even going to allow you entry into our master's program.
Wow. So, I'm sure you're feeling really good about yourself right now.
I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? It's really the energy. And a woman in the communication department, the assistant of the department at the time, Beth Hutchins, the most amazing woman ever.
Yeah.
She calls me in one day and says, Melissa, I got this flyer in the mail for this internship program. It's called T3. And I was like, okay, what is that? It's called the Turner Trainee Team, but there's no application. All it says is send us your talent in a project.
Right.
And I was so intrigued by that as an artist. I was like, what does that even mean? And I didn't know what Turner Trainee Team meant. It was Turner Broadcasting. I didn't know what Turner Broadcasting meant.
Right.
I'm like, what's a Turner?
Yeah.
And so after doing research, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, TNT, TBS, Turner Classic Movies. And I was like, oh, okay. And you didn't know where you're going to be placed. All it said was, create a project and send it to us. And so at the time I designed a TV guide magazine, all about myself, my brand. I put in fake ads of me as Cleopatra in a TCM ad. I made myself a ball girl for the NBA on TNT. I had writing samples. I had my artwork in there. Most of it was my art. Right. And I submitted it. And TNT marketing called me and said, you sold yourself so well to us. We think you would do an amazing job of selling our content to consumers. And that's how I got my first marketing job.
And just get that, which is fantastic, by the way. That's like with the grit. So think about it. Some people could just go into a hole and just completely change whatever. And you're now going to Turner, which had a lot of, I think if you read the book, and by the way, Melissa's book is available anywhere books are found, including Amazon. So make sure you check it out. But
thanks for the plug.
Yeah, anytime. I don't get any fees. We have to talk about that. But but when you went to Turner, there's a lot of things that happen in terms of you met mentors, you made networks, you expanded your skills. And by the way, even though you did not work with him, there's this guy running, was it TNT? Steve Koonin, who was president of TNT, who's now president of what?
The Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, but even though you did not work with him, it's kind of this thing that was symbiotic that kind of happened. But if you think about your Turner experience, what was the biggest, learnings for you during that time at this media company?
It was interesting because you mentioned Steve Koonin. When I was an intern, when I first got into Turner, I made no money. Like intern program did not pay well. And so I called my old boss from the Heat, said, hey, anyone in Atlanta? He introduced me to the equipment manager for the Hawks. And I was a ball girl that first year in Atlanta, mopping up sweat on the court for the Hawks while also interning. And that happened to be the year the All-Star game was in Atlanta. Yeah. And so Steve, who was the president, his son was like an honorary ball kid. Every home game, he would see me mopping up sweat. Then he would see me in the office as an intern. Yeah. And so that resonated. Throughout my career, as I grew, I did some brand strategy projects where he was the highest on the totem pole. I was the lowest. And, many, many years later, I got laid off from Turner, actually completely. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, got laid off, went to a draft party as a fan. I run into him and he was like, I know you love basketball. I know you love branding. Would you like to come and help me build a brand at the Hawks? Yeah. Which was a very crazy full circle moment. But of the experiences I had at Turner, one was being open. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up. I still don't. Right. But every time I took a job or an opportunity, it was let me raise my hand, do the stuff no one else wants to do and just learn. Right. But by not being pinpointed and I have to do this, it opened up so many other opportunities. But the biggest, through all the relationships that I built, I learned how to be an asset to people, not a liability on their time. Right. And that was probably the greatest lesson because the number of, hey, let me grab 30 minutes. We'll love to do coffee. Want to talk to you. Want to know how what you do impacts what I do is great. Right. But if it's all about you and never about me, then I'm like, all right, I can't have enough coffee in the world to talk to everyone.
And you also leaned into your creative because you all the way back to when you were a kid, you just loved the arts and creativity because you ended up getting a master's from
Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design. Yeah. It was more of a brand studies, but I really focused it on brand strategy because that's where I wanted to send my career.
But that was very relevant when you were at Turner, right?
Very much so.
So how do you lean? Even today, how, because there's so much tension, I feel like, about, well, it's STEM and people forget instead of STEAM, right? And it's creative is this nice to have. in this tech world, but it's really not. So how do you kind of embrace creativity in what you do every day?
You know, a couple of ways. I would say right now, I don't paint all the time. I paint with my daughter.
Right.
She's 7, so that's my artistic talents right there. But I really look at creative ways to solve unique business challenges.
Right.
And that's been it. And so whether it's how do we use technology in a creative way for the Atlanta Hawks, whether internally and solving internal challenges we have, or externally, and how do we grow or engage fans in new and unique ways.
Yeah.
So sometimes it may be as simple as looking at a social platform that we've been on, but how do we turn it on its ear and look at that platform and use it in a differentiated way to help create innovation for our brand?
Right. Well, you know, kind of going creative into, there's an element. So, you know, as I mentioned, I have a book coming out later this year, and I talk about this thing called confusion tolerance. And it's this ability that I think real, true innovation leaders, disruptive leaders, change leaders have to be comfortable in ambiguity and move people along, which, by the way, I don't think Melissa even knows it, but we actually write about Melissa in the book, in that chapter. But because you love to talk about, when we were on our podcast together, about operating or playing in the gray. So talk about what that means for you.
Yeah, you know, it's actually a term that, you know, Steve Kuhn and I came up with, because the realization is that there's so many people, especially in corporate America, that can operate in black and white, which is, I have a job description. This is what you want me to do. I will do exactly that one thing. And if I do that one thing, I will succeed. That's cool. Right. You know, and there are a lot of industries where that makes a ton of sense. In sports, entertainment, creative worlds, there's a much broader idea where you have to be flexible to market conditions on a dime.
Right.
The way sports operates, like even COVID was the biggest one for everyone.
Right.
Everyone had to play in the gray at that moment, whether they knew it or not. But if you're comfortable with the ambiguity and not knowing exactly what the next move is, I feel like it really just helps open up your mindset on what opportunities are, you know, solutions are feasible.
Yeah.
And so for us, that flexibility, and we say to adapt to market conditions, is important, because with our team, you know, the one thing about being a CMO of a sports team is I don't control my product. Everyone else can maybe say, hey, I work for this food chain. I don't want to sell this food anymore. I have players.
Right.
They are there. You can't control injuries. I don't control who gets drafted. And so much of it is really, how do we build a brand that can sit on top of whatever the product may be at that time? Can't control wins and losses.
Right.
And so a big piece of that is the ability to play in the gray and trying to support and lead a team to have the same mindset, even though there are a lot of black and white thinkers within that, which is very important still for certain roles.
Yeah, and how do you coach your team to that? I think it's really hard, because people tend to I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, and sometimes you're like, well, let's kind of operate here, and we will commit. How do you?
Well, I have a lot of task masters sometimes, and there are people who just, I am here to execute this task, and all I want to do is check the box, and I'm done, and I'm on to the next task. And so I think by really helping to explain the why. And I found that be incredibly important in playing in the gray. So if you shift, if I explain to you why we shifted and can give you context for it, that may be able to shift your task to a different direction. We're not like, but we've been working on this. We had to do this.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in marketing, it seems like it's really easy to get focused on tasks. So I'm going to optimize my social media metric X. Mm-hmm. But you may have zero to do in terms of driving more ticket sales or whatever it is.
Well, it's funny, when I first got there, so much of it for us was follower growth. You know, like the Hawks were a little bit late in the game on a lot of social platforms. So we've always been trying to play catch up, and you can't. Based on the algorithm, it is what it is. You started early. If you won a championship, you're growing. If you're not, so we said, we're going to focus on local follower growth. That was going to be an important tactic. So we tag everything out, try to grow local followers. And then very quickly, we saw our engagement sucked. And so in looking at what's necessary from corporate partnerships, from just fan engagement, wanting to grow our brand, we said, this isn't the right metric. Right. We can have followers from anywhere, but if they're really engaged, that's more meaningful and impactful. And so being able to shift and getting people's mindsets to say, all right, that tactic we were doing, and it was working-ish, but the goal shifted. And so for me, I'm very goal-oriented. Like, what are we doing? How are we going to get there? Let's figure out our KPIs and move towards that. So sometimes they shift for good reasons.
And it's funny, you're talking about engagement with which I think is something, I think, again, tasks people mean only positive too, but engagement could mean they're mad at you as well. You know, which I'm sure they're never been.
We try to not.
Yeah, we try not to be, but it could be like,
it absolutely has
so much. How could you do this or whatever? Yeah. But you know, it's fine. But there's no basketball going on right now anyway. So right. So
not with the Hawks, but it's okay.
No, I mean, just in general, I've stopped watching. So, but So as we start getting close to wrapping up here, though, I do want to, when you start thinking about the kind of the future for you, or actually in terms of the impact you leave on people, what's the sort of thing you want people to say about you when you leave the room?
For me, I think the most important thing is she was a great mom, because to me that comes before everything else. So that's just my personal life, always comes before work. That she was super down to earth, because I've encountered many other executives that are very executive-y, and I never fit that mold. So that's one. And then that she made really dope shit. You know, that's my catchphrase internally. That's what we're all about at the end of the day. So
that's
those
so
are my
perfect.
things.
So Melissa, and I've known Melissa now for years, and it is so spot on, and it's so accessible. So, and look, there's, we talk about authenticity a lot, and Melissa is authentic. I think is a secret for leading through ambiguity, by the way.
I mean, I think it can be. I think integrity is important as well. So they need to know that you're truly
authentically not
authentic with integrity.
There's certain names I won't mention. Okay.
Roll in a different kind of way.
But yeah, well, good. Well, Melissa, first of all, just remember from and by the way, your book, you talked about your daughter.
Yes.
Why'd you write the book?
For my daughter.
Right.
And so my mother, she passed away some years before I had my daughter, and there were so many questions I had for her. And I was like, man, I wish I could ask her these questions. And I would ask her brothers or other family members, and I would hear pieces that were hearsay.
Right.
And I was like, I wish I knew her story from her. And so it really didn't resonate till I had my daughter. And I was like, I would do speaking engagements while I was at Turner and other places, and people would always say, you should write a book. Your story's so interesting. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really read. I don't have a ton of time. Right. But after I had her, I said, it's really important that I put my story down for her to be able to consume from my voice and from me. And so in writing the book for her, when I finished, I worked with a local publisher in Atlanta to do it. They were like, so I don't want to, offend you. Have you thought about marketing the book? And I was like, no, not at all. I just wrote it for my kid. But since then, I think it's probably helped so many people. It's a quick read, but the whole idea here's my story, but a lot of the insights that I've learned along the way that hopefully help other people, both senior level professionals as well as folks coming out of school along their path and their journey.
Well, great. Well, Melissa, you're one of my favorite people. We get to hang out in Atlanta all the time. So I always love being on stage with Melissa. And so first of all, Melissa's book, From Ball Girl to CMO, everywhere books are sold, and including Amazon. Make sure you check that out.
Yep. And I have a website too, if anyone wants to see. I have my artwork on it. People are like, oh, your art is there. So it's melissamproctor.com. And if anyone wants to connect, whether Instagram or LinkedIn, no matter what, I'm here.
Follow her on social, and make sure to go to disruptorstudio.show if you want to hear like a 90-minute version of this conversation that Melissa had. I think it was during the lockdown period or whatever. And so we just talked. But we get really deep into the book, and we really get we talk about Hurricane Andrew, but down in Miami, and a whole bunch of things that shaped Melissa's life. So make sure to check that out, and then follow me on social media to learn about when the book will come out that will talk about Melissa, and also about Jay Bailey that will be on stage tomorrow here, another good friend of ours who is disrupting how entrepreneurship and innovation works out of Atlanta as well, and also a partner of the Atlanta Hawks. Too, so.
Yeah, Jay's great.
So thanks, Melissa, and thanks everybody. Enjoy Charleston. Don't stay out on King Street too long.
Hey guys, that was great. Thank you, Alex and Melissa. Wow, talk about tenacity and resilience. Melissa is a great example of that for us. A couple of housekeeping items, and we'll let y'all go grab lunch. Lunch is from 12 until, let's say, 1:10. You want to be back here at 1:15. We have moderator Carrie Jakewith that's going to introduce panel members for practical pathways into the metaverse and Web3. So you'll want to be here for that. And then 1:50 to 3:40, we're going to have lots of breakout sessions. Again, the 4:30 Resilience Shindig happy hours at 6 o'clock tonight. We've got two, one at the Pantheon, sponsored by Pantheon at Hotel Emmeline. And then the second is the Office People Showcase happy hour at Bodega. So y'all enjoy lunch. There's lots of places around here that you can eat. Charleston's a food mecca. We've got caviar and bananas, Basic Kitchen, Beach, Verde, lots of things that you can choose from. So enjoy, and we'll see you back here at 1:15. I hear the beating in my heart.